Hey, welcome to Live with Lynn. So if you're here, say hi. If you're watching the replay, be sure to type replay so I know you were here. I'm Lynn Huber, and I appreciate you following me. So today I'm going to talk about mistakes are miracles. It's true. It really is. So we all make mistakes from time to time, right? I mean, luckily, most of the time when we screw up, the consequences of our mistake aren't usually too bad, or there's something we can recover from pretty easily. Sure, we might feel a little embarrassed and hope nobody saw it, right? But more often than not, life goes on and the world neither noticed nor cared that we screwed up. So when you hear the word miracle, chances are you're probably picturing a birth of a child, a remarkable survival story of some awful tragedy, or some other kind of remarkable events that you probably see on the headlines of the newspaper, right? But the idea of mistakes fitting into this category is probably pretty foreign in your mind. But when you stop and consider all the wonderful things that were brought about by by mistakes, that can change the way you think, right? It helps us understand the value of problems and errors and the things that naturally occur in our lives. Because like I've said many times, we all make mistakes. We can't not make mistakes. If we're not making mistakes, we're not moving forward, right? So let's just look at some of those mistakes that have turned out to change the world. Surely some of these are going to encourage you that maybe your mistakes are okay and not let that fear of making them stop you from going after your dreams and your goals. So penicillin, y'all know about penicillin, right? According to the New World Encyclopedia, penicillin has currently saved over 200 million lives. I know all of us have had penicillin probably in our lives, and it's probably helped us, right? The discovery of this wonderful medical intervention has literally changed the course of not only the healthcare field, but history in general. It makes sense, though, to believe that discovering penicillin occurred over the course of years of cutting-edge research and in the world's greatest laboratory, and that a whole bunch of brilliant minds came together to create this, right? Not true. In 1928, it was a Scottish scientist. His name was Alexander Fleming, and he left several petri dishes in his laboratory unwashed and exposed overnight. I guess he was tired, he'd had a long day, and he just went home and just left them. But when he came in the next day, he noticed that the dishes had already been contaminated and had been growing patches of bacteria. And so because he had an open mind, though, he was able to see something different. You know, curiously, one of the dishes had a patch of mold on it. And that mold, after he looked at it further, had actually prevented the bacteria from growing in that area where the mold was. And so he was then able to isolate and extract from the mold and create the drug we now know as penicillin. And it's become many others since then. Hi, Kathleen. Good to see you. How about the pacemaker? You know, the BC Medical Journal outlines the fascinating story of how the pacemaker, which is one of the most remarkable devices ever to grace the field of medicine, came to be. In the 1940s, Canadian engineer John Hobbs was attempting to create a method of pasteurizing beer using radio frequency heating. This sounds like something up Richard's alley. But the truth is, he was really passionate about his beer project, and when it turned out that he had to be transferred to the Banting Institute in Toronto to explore the possibility of using his heating method in cardiac surgery, he wasn't happy about it. He considered that a waste of his time because his passion was this beer project. And so at the time, though, several cardiac surgeons had been using hypothermia in the operating room in order to slow the heart down enough to perform open heart surgery. But the problem with that was that when you get the heart below a certain temperature, or the body below that certain temperature, the heart would stop beating entirely. Obviously, that was a problem if you wanted to survive surgery, right? So Hobbs suggested that the idea that applying the same electrical impulses he had begun to use in his pasteurizing process might actually cause the heart to contract. And so when this proved true, it was discovered that those same impulses, when applied in the appropriate rhythm, actually could reproduce the same contraction frequency of a human heartbeat. And that was the catalyst to the series of events that led to the invention of the pacemaker. Kathleen, thanks. I'm really not. I Google it. But hey, super glue. What do you guys know about super glue? So let's get out of the medical field here for a minute. And you can't leave out the miraculous mistake that led to the discovery of super glue, right? It was during World War II. Dr. Harry Coover was involved in a project to create a new type of gun sight that was made out of a clear plastic-like material. And the researchers ended up giving up on the project because it was just too difficult to work with. I mean, the plastic stuff that they were using stuck to everything it came in contact with. And so years later, while working on another aviation product, Coover thought back to that pesky substance that had given him so much grief during that time. And one thing led to another, and he experienced his eureka moment, leading him to commercialize superglue, which, believe it or not, back then, well, it was the Navy or whatever, but it was used at the time to save countless vases and ceramic decorations from being knocked off the table while passing food around the dinner table. So they super glued them down. So hey, the Slinky. You guys all know the Slinky, right? I mean, the song, a spring, a marvelous thing. Everyone knows it's Slinky, right? Well, if the song came, everyone knows it's industrial equipment stabilizers, that probably wouldn't be quite so catchy. But that was the intended use of the spring because it was the Navy. It was Richard James in the Navy. He was developing a sensitive spring that was meant to keep fragile equipment steady on the ships. And he knocked one of his new springs from the shelf, and it's the funniest thing. He just watched it like a Slinky, go down, do, 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 do. And he was like, wow. And so he took it home to show it to his wife to see what she thought of it, and she saw potential for a new toy. So they got the dictionary out, and they went looking, and they came up with the word Slinky, which is a Swedish word that means sleek and sinuous. So by the time the toy was demonstrated in front of Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia during 1945 Christmas season, it was clear it was going to be a big hit. And that industrial machine that James had, where he made this thing originally, it could coil 80 feet of wire into 2 inches. And so hundreds of Slinkies were already being sold. And since then, the Slinky has found other uses. I mean, it's in Vietnam, they use it as an antenna and as a therapy tool. And, there's all kinds of uses for it. And then, thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate you. And then Post-it notes. When you're done with a Post-it note, you throw it in the wastebasket. Well, that's pretty much what Spencer Silver did when he was trying to develop a super strong adhesive for 3M in 1968. And it didn't work. It wasn't sticky enough. It wasn't adhesive enough. And it stuck to objects, but it wouldn't stick. It came off, right? And so he raved. He saw a use for it, though. I mean, he raved about the potential uses of this new weak sort of glue around 3M for years, but nobody would listen to him. And then finally, 3M had a policy where they encouraged employees to step out of their own comfort zone or out of their own department and see what people were doing in other departments. Because having more eyes on things, and that's a smart thing, having more eyes on things leads to more technology, more, it makes greater things happen, right? And so Art Fry was a colleague that he attended one of Silver's seminars, and he saw something that no one else did. I know this is going to sound strange, but he found that this super glue, what am I talking? The Post-it note, the glue for the Post-it note, it worked in his hymn book, which he used it as holding his page in his hymn book, which his bookmarks kept falling out of. And so when you add his mild adhesive to paper bookmarks, that's when the Post-it note was born. And so 3M finally agreed to distribute the Post-it note worldwide in 1980. So it's like 20 years later, a decade, I guess. It was like 1968 when it was first. So it was like, almost 2 decades. So 30 years later now, they're like as important to our office as a stapler. So, hey, making mistakes is not only a necessary part of our lives. Those mistakes are the essence of new learning. And look at all the things that have come out of mistakes. So I talk about this all the time, but it's important that we work to cultivate that growth mindset, right? We want to grow. We want to see what's around us, and we want to be open to it. And so mistakes actually help us develop and improve our skills and our abilities. And sometimes they even show us new ways to do things or do things differently, right? So maybe even more important, mistakes help us to remember that all of our efforts, whether they come to or don't come to, and are how we meet the game of life every day, right? And the more passionate we play that game of life, the more we get out of it. That's just how it is. But that invariably means more, not fewer screw ups and even some colossal mistakes. I mean, that happens. So, hey, how about you? Do you have a story of a mistake that became a miracle? You know, what kinds of things do you do to keep your mind open to making mistakes and learning from them? So please share with us below. I would love to hear what you have to say. And I want to thank you for being here. I went a little longer than I wanted to. Kathleen, thank you for being live with me today. And I want everybody to have a great day. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.